Thomas. I'm happy that I am here, and I'm glad that we are having this interview with you.
Thank you very much for this occasion. I'm glad to.
Thank you. Thomas, let me start from EU and Iraq relations and projects. Right now, what projects are undergoing by the EU in Iraq?
Well, let me perhaps start from the very general point. Our mandate, my mandate here is to help Iraq stabilize, to help Iraq build up as a sovereign, as a stable country, as a stable state also, with reliability for the citizens. And I like very much the narrative Iraq to the Iraqis. And we are here actually to help with what we can provide as services, as experience from the European side. And it is state building, it is helping up building authorities. There's a lot of questions with standards, and we may come later also to a question like, for example, the fight against corruption. So our mandate here is primarily to help Iraq after all the bad history of the last 20, 30, 40 years to build up as a stable state for the citizens. Concretely, in terms of projects, we underpin this by financial aid projects, by political dialogue. Currently, we have 411 million euros programmed for some 60 projects across all the various panopticon of areas where we work in, but still we focus essentially on diversification of the economy, private sector development, on education, and also on governance. Migration is a big point, also the internally displaced people.
This relation right now with Iraq, where it is focused more?
It is focused on the political development, and we want really to have a stable Iraq, stable meaning inside the country domestically, but also in the region. Because I personally think that Iraq can play a much, much bigger role geographically in the center of Arab and Muslim countries, but also politically. You have Shia, Sunni, Kurdish, Christians. This is a variety of sources, of resources that not the other countries do not have. So there is a potential that is in this country that should be moved ahead.
About businesses, European businesses in Iraq, do you think that European companies had the chance to come to Iraq, take projects and open branches as needed?
We are on the way. We are on the way to do this, and we are on the way to do this together with the government, and I feel a great reassurance by the government of Prime Minister al-Sudani in this regard. As I said in the beginning, we want to help Iraq to build up these capacities, to have structures, to attract companies, businesses, enterprises from outside. Why I'm saying this? You need standards that have to be in place so that when companies from Europe come, that they know, okay, I have to pay taxes in this way, I get properties of land in that way, I can rely on the security of my investments. This is very important. We are in the beginning of this process, but I feel a clear commitment on the side of the government to go ahead.
So you're optimistic?
I'm optimistic in this regard. It is a lot of work.
You mentioned that you help the government politically and to do more, developing more in politics. We have an issue like the issue of Kirkuk, for example. EU in the past helped to solve issues and disputed problems between different nations and governments like Kirkuk. Do you provide any support for the Iraqi government and the government in Kurdistan to resolve the issue of Kirkuk?
We are ready to help. We are ready, I wouldn't say mediate, but we are ready to help and to be there to talk. But there is perhaps also a change in European foreign policy over the last years. We have understood in many countries in the world that it is not good to go there, to come and to say, do it exactly like this because we have learned this is good. We're not here to dominate, to dictate, to impose ourselves. We're ready to help, but I think at the end of the day, the solution must come from inside,
Mhm.
because then it is a sustainable solution, and a solution that can really endure also. So happy to help, but not anymore, if I would say, by strong recommendations, by strong pushing, but by being available to facilitate here and there.
So it's up to the Kurds and the Iraqis to solve their problem and to initiate resolving this, and then you can be there and be ready to help.
Absolutely, yes. The solution of problems must come from inside the country.
So
Because
the time of pressure is gone.
yeah, if it was really the case in Iraq, I have never felt ourselves here as a big colonial power, if I may say, ironically.
Well, because there was this expectation always, especially by the Kurds, that there must be a pressure on Iraqi government to, to push the government to deal with this matter. But you think that?
No, this is part of our policy. We still engage. We still engage, but the engagement is not to say to A, you have to do this, and to say to B, you have to do that. The engagement is to bring together, to convene, and to help in this regard, but not to impose.
An issue that's a problem in Iraq, and it has also, as we see it in the past, reflection in Europe, it's extremism, especially religious extremism. We all remember ISIS. How do you support the Iraqi government to eliminate extremism, especially religious extremism?
This is a very important question, a very important point. We see the development now in the political discussion in Iraq regarding, well, Daesh is defeated. We don't need this anymore so much as before. Well, yes, to a certain extent this is true. But there are still remnants remaining. We have seen the terrible attack in Iran, killing almost or more than 100 people. So this is not completely over. And there is also a new phenomenon that we have to be aware. Terrorism, extremism is not anymore a national phenomenon. It is a transnational, it is an international phenomenon. It is linked to anti-money laundering, which we have to do. It is linked, as you are saying, countering extremism, be it religious, be it other but it is mostly religious, I agree. So we have first of all to make ourselves clear, it's not anymore a national problem. Yeah. And particularly in Iraq, where you have the interactions with the neighbors and the lack of control also, certainly we come back to the state building, capacity building. It's very important, and we are engaging with Ministry of Interior, with the National Security Advisor, to develop programs on counter-terrorism, on anti-money laundering, and that includes the fight against extremism very clearly. Yeah. And we do this together also. We have an advisory mission here for the civilian security sector reform. They're very good in this, and the government calls upon us to help in this regard.
When we talk about extremism, of course, we remember the Yazidi Kurds. Do you have, as EU now, any projects to support the Yazidi Kurds and rebuild their city, Shingal? Yeah,
we have had projects the whole time with the Yazidis, and let me clearly say again that what happens with the Yazidis was a genocide, and that is absolutely there is no discussion about this. We have had problems in the past, in particular for the repatriation and bringing people back to their homes. And this is something also that we want to continue to do. Now, what we have agreed with the government here in Baghdad is a program for the next 3 years of 20 million euros to help internally displaced people to come back to their homes. This includes the Yazidis, and there is a big bunch of money reserved for that. We are going in the next weeks and months to negotiate with the government how we address this concretely and which concrete projects we are sorting out for this and developing for this. Yes, and I mean the agreement is still to be implemented. It's not yet there. I mean, people cannot yet go back to their old city.
Implementing this agreement, is it somehow affecting your vision and implement your projects for the Yazidis and for the city?
It's part of what we plan to do, yes.
What I mean is, when we see that this agreement is not implemented yet, how does that affect your projects?
Well, we look at concrete things we can do. It can be refurbishment of houses, buildings. It can be rearranging and refurbishment of roads. But then in particular, also an identification who actually is from where and was where and when, and to identify how can we steer all the return process. It's an administrative work at the very end, but with a big political impact.
We have drug smuggling. It's an international problem like terrorism, but drug smuggling from this region of the world to Europe is a big problem. Do you have any cooperation with the government in Iraq and also in Kurdistan in this matter?
Some member states are very active already on this, EU member states. We as EU are more in the beginning of this process. It is part of what we discussed just a bit earlier with regard to extremism and counterterrorism. You have these phenomena, this is all interlinked. You have the counterterrorism, the organized crimes, and the drug smuggling. Yes, effectively. And because it's not about the drugs, this is all about money. And it is all about money and who gets the money. And then this involves, we talk later certainly also about migration, and it is all interlinked in this. Yes, we are engaging with the government to see what we can do better in this regard.
Migration, illegal migration from Africa and also this region is increasing mainly to Europe. What have you done and will do to support the Iraqi government and also KRG to prevent illegal migration from this region, Iraq and Kurdistan, to Europe?
Well, the first part is, it's said very easily, but it is essential. The first part is what we call to deal with the root causes. Why do people want to leave your country? Why do we want people to leave the Kurdistan region? The root causes we have to look at. This is economic development, as I said in the beginning, more diversification, more private sector development. If a family can live in your country in a safe environment, in a secure environment, with a reliable income, why should anybody go away? So there are the root causes for this. The other point in root causes is the democracy. If people feel they do not have their rights, they cannot express themselves, they are restrained in their personal freedom, then they leave also. So this is the number one. Then still, there are people leaving, and you're right, we had in Europe in 2022, in all the member states, 17,000 asylum applications from all Iraq. 17,000, a bit more even. It seems that in 2023 it will become a little bit less. But our statistics clearly say that maximum a third of these applications will be honored. Hence, all the people have to come back. And when they need to come back after a long process that involves also legal remedy and legal verification of the decisions by the respective authorities, then the question is, what do we do here? What is the government doing with these people here? Because they have to be reintegrated. And that is a question that is very essential. You know, this country has a big problem with this, I would say not self-responsibilized, because it is falling upon the country. You have internally displaced people even coming from Al-Hol camp, and I'm also glad to tell you that the president of the European Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, discussed recently with Prime Minister al-Sudani what we do with Europeans in Al-Hol, for which in principle Iraq is not in charge. But still there are others who have to be reintegrated into society. So you have on the one hand internally displaced people to be reintegrated, but you have also those who come back from Europe because their asylum requests have not been honored or respected, and they will come back sooner or later. So, but for that also we have another kind of financial aid program where we really want to make sure that there is social inclusion and that the people can come back in the best possible case, at the place from which they left.
In recent years, I read many articles. I heard a lot about al-Hol. And this sentence, literally, I hear it again and again. Why European countries do not take their citizens back from Hol camp?
Well, it's it's very easy, because they know who these people are, and they do not want them back at home. But we have an obligation to take them
But
back.
they are citizens.
Yes,
of
I know.
European countries.
Yeah, I know. But therefore, we have to take them back. And again, we really want to engage with the government to see how we do this practically. And we then, on our side, should also have programs on reintegration of these people in our countries when they come back home. So there is no choice. We have to do this.
EU pays high attention to press freedom and women's rights. How do you see the situation of press freedom and women's rights in Iraq and the Kurdistan region?
Let me start with freedom of media. We come from a very high standard in the European Union. If there is the slightest doubt that media, press, journalists, yourself, are hampered or hindered in their work, there is immediately an outcry. So we have very high standards. Now, these high standards are not given in Iraq yet, and they are not given either in the Kurdistan region. This has historical reasons. This has reasons also in the existence of a non-strong economic development in the country, and of different influences between various parts of the society. We are not yet there where we particularly wish to see Iraq. There is, let's say, there's still room for improvement, but also there we engage with government, we engage with the Kurdistan, with the Kurdistan government very much on these points, and to make our voice clear. But again, as I said earlier, not in a way to impose. We say we would wish to see this because we think, from our experience, it would be good for the social and economic development of your country.
Do you think these freedoms, freedom of speech, media, and women's right too, they are improving, or do you see any backsliding anywhere?
I think all in all they are improving, but it is slow. It is a very slow process, and obviously now with all the actions that are taking place, the threats by military actions, the pressure from outside that comes on this country after Israel, after October 7, this makes it more difficult. We have to be honest to ourselves that we cannot expect miracles in a time where a country like this one is under terrible pressure from outside, again, for which it is only partly responsible. So yes, but it is for us an encouragement to do even more. And on women's rights, it's the same. But, you know, I have served in other countries, and the situation is not that bad here, frankly speaking. Yeah, obviously, sometimes you would wish to see in meetings or where you go in events, you wish to see more women. I'm sure it will come, but you need also time. The whole process of building up a state towards a democratic state, we have to be patient. It needs time. I know politicians are not patient by default, whether in Iraq or in Europe or somewhere else, but we need to give these processes time.
You ran back to groups' attacks on coalition bases in Iraq. What threat do they pose to the EU?
Listen, this is a subject that creates for us a big headache. Let me tell you, I feel, since I have arrived here and since the war of Israel against Hamas has started, I have a clear feeling that Europe is losing ground in Iraq and in the region, because we are kind of seen complicit or at the side of Israel, which may not true in this absolute term, because we work a lot on the diplomatic front, also behind the curtain, to do everything possible that this terrible war stops. Now, when it comes to these attacks here, I can only say both sides have to de-escalate, and we have been very clear on this. The military factions who are attacking U.S. bases, they are not only attacking U.S. bases.
Coalition.
In most of these coalition bases are European member states soldiers. I do not want to think today what happens if Belgians, Germans, French, or other of our soldiers are suddenly killed. We have called upon also the United States to think twice and to reflect clearly. Our way out of this is dialogue and talk. It's political dialogue and talk. And I know that many responsible and reasonable Iraqi politicians want this way as well. From whichever camp they come and from whichever group they come. Because at the end, it will be a lose-lose game. So I think we have all to be extremely careful that this is not exploding further on. I must tell you, I have followed, and also in discussion with the government, I see that Prime Minister al-Sudani is making all attempts to talk to these factions and to try to convince them to slow down their actions. I'm really confident that we will see a de-escalation, hopefully in the coming days and weeks.
As you said, these attacks are on coalition basis, where there are European members too. But we don't see European countries taking part with the United States in attacking these groups in retaliation. Why?
It is not our policy. It's not our policy to do this, and also as opposed to the Americans, so far we have not been injured. We have not had cases of people killed, and it is our approach, as I said, more to go to dialogue, to talk, and to political solution of this. Yeah. I'm not saying this remains like this.
But EU countries are part of the international coalition, as we said, against ISIS. Do you believe that ISIS still pose a threat on Iraq?
Well, you know what I find very good, and this is again the proof for political dialogue and that it is necessary. In the talks that have started now under the so-called High Military Commission, there is the number one of the agenda of the tasking that has been given to all the sides to find out how strong Daesh, ISIL, ISIS is still in Iraq and in Syria. It's the number one question. I think this is very relevant to verify this. I personally believe it's not over, but there is a big success that has been achieved in the past. Also thanks to Iraqi military and to Iraqi interventions. It's not only the coalition forces, it was the working together of coalition forces with the Iraqi forces. And I think we have to come back to this again. And if then the High Military Commission can continue its work, which we would very much welcome, then this question will be in detail analyzed, and then the other questions will follow. So I guess experts will have a very clear view on this. My personal take is a lot has been achieved. There may be some remaining cases. I come back to Kerman in Iran, where we have seen what has happened. Yeah?
As you said, the negotiation between Iraq and the United States mainly. It's about a withdrawal or finding a new form of military alliances with the international coalition. Will the EU take part in these negotiations?
We are taking part in the negotiations primarily in the form of our member states, because we as EU, we do not have military, we are not part of the coalition forces. But obviously we consult each other and we discuss internally about this process. Yes. And again, it should be the subject and the outcome of political talks, what at the end it is what is being agreed. If it is a total withdrawal, if it is a partial withdrawal, let the debates see where we come. And because then again, the solution is sustainable. If one imposes him or herself on the other one, it will not be sustainable.
But ISIS, and according to reports, ISIS attacks and movement in Iraq and Syria somehow increased. Maybe small attacks, small movements, but they are still there. Dissolution of the international coalition and disassembling this coalition, do you think it will somehow be a chance for ISIS to pose a bigger threat than what is it already now?
No, I do not think this. Again, if there is a sound solution that comes out of these discussions about these consultations at high level, between consultations amongst politicians, but more importantly, actually amongst military experts, soldiers, and military leaders, with a clear analysis, and this has to be free of any ideology. It has to be very analytical. I think what is then being set up at the end, and we don't know this today, but I think what is then being set up at the end can also be effective to not to allow ISIS to come back.
Thomas Seiler, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to my next visit in the Kurdistan region.
I hope to see you there. Thanks.